Hello fellow thinkers! My name is Balázs and welcome back to my channel Inner Talks. Now before I get started with today's episode, I do want to touch again on the concept behind this channel. My main goal here is to make you think, not to make you agree or disagree with me. I'm not a scientist and I'm not a scholar. I'm presenting ideas and theories mixed with facts in order to make you step outside of your comfort zone, to think outside of the box. I'd like to train you to think with the bigger picture in mind. So if my first episode sounded too far-fetched and you can refute it with constructive criticism, then please do so. The best things in life are built when people work together to achieve something they couldn't do alone. And the subjects I'm covering here require us to think in community. So I'm happy that you're back, no matter if you came here to agree or disagree. Because most of all, I want you to come here to be inspired to think. Because as Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So let's get started. In my first episode on this subject, I talked about the impact phase. In case you haven't seen that video, you can check it out here. And before I get started with phase 2, let me clarify something. When I talk about environment, I mean a broader idea than what most people think. Environment for me is not only nature, but everything outside of me. So my definition of environment is everything outside of the individual. In that sense, pollution is not only when I use hairspray or I litter, but also if I pollute your mind with negative thinking or ideas that just don't lead anywhere. So when I said in my first video that we have disregarded our environment and that's snapping back at us now, I didn't only mean the damage we have done to nature, but also the damage we have done to each other. But I'll get deeper into this in today's episode. So in today's episode, I'm going to talk about the impression phase. And the impression phase is when the cause of the event is still present and we act with that in mind. So this has been going on for the past couple months and it will still keep going on for a while. In this sense, I might not be talking in this episode about a lot of things that are not obvious, because this is what's going on right now and this is what we're experiencing. But I might be able to shed some light on some dynamics that are in the background. Also, we do have to talk about this in order for the last phase to make more sense. Just like in my previous video, I'm going to break it down to different layers of existence. So let's get started with the physical again. On the physical level, we had to adjust to a new norm. We have to wear masks and gloves and wash our hands obsessively, disinfect everything we bring into our homes, keeping 6 feet distance from everyone, not touching our face, and not kissing strangers. We also had to start watching for symptoms of COVID-19, come up with ways to stay active because gyms, parks, hiking trails, beaches have been closed. Socially, we also had to conform to a new norm, which is isolation. No more going to the bars, no more going to restaurants, movie theaters, concerts, not meeting up with friends, not visiting family, and so on. Our social interactions have been reduced to the essential, only going to places where we need to and only meeting people that we need to. This created a frustration in many, and I understand that some business owners went out of business because of the lockdown. But most people who protested against the lockdown were not business owners. They were protesting for their freedom to go to the beach, for their freedom to go to the hairdresser, the freedom to go shopping. But let me point out two things here. Do you remember when you were a kid and your parents told you no playtime until you do your homework? Whose interest was that act of strictness? Was it your parents' interest or was it your interest to do the homework? Was it your parents who benefited it or was it you? Was it you who got an education, then probably landed a job, was able to make a living? Yet in that moment, when your parents told you no playtime, you probably hated your parents for taking away your freedom. So those people who protested against the lockdown, did they ever consider the bigger picture? That maybe they don't see something and that maybe that is in their own interest to be under lockdown. And maybe it's not even just their own interest, but their friends and family's interest as well. Freedom is very relative. It cannot be at the cost of other people's freedom. Now, entitlement is a much deadlier disease that has been spreading for much longer than COVID-19. Internationally, we experienced no travel outside of the very essential. Many of our summer plans had to be cancelled, and we're spending our time locally. On the other hand, we're looking at other countries, how they're dealing with the virus, if they're opening their economy already, and if they do so, then how it's working out for them. Now, let me touch on something that's specific to the US, but it can be a lesson to other countries as well. The death rates here in the US have been pretty high, considering that the US prides itself in having the best doctors and medical equipment available. So how is that possible? I think there are two main factors here to consider. One is the overall health of the general population. Health-conscious eating is not very common here in the US. Most foods are processed, high in sugar, high in sodium, high in calorie, lots of animal proteins. Now, I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I am conscious about what I eat, not only for my own health, but also for sustainability. And while some people in big metropolitan cities are health conscious, the general population is not well educated on health and healthy choices. So that is one contributing factor for the higher death rates through higher pre-existing conditions. The second factor is the healthcare system. With no universal healthcare here, many people who don't have insurance or have insurance with high deductibles, they just choose not to go to a doctor even if they show symptoms of COVID-19. The reason for that is because they cannot afford to go to a doctor, and so they prefer to just wait it out until maybe it's too late, and by that time they might have infected a lot of people in their surroundings. Let's go to the economical level. Stock markets have slowly corrected themselves to some extent, but there's a lot more going on here on the economical level that contributed to this event. Some people have been pointing fingers at China for starting this pandemic because it's such a third world country where they're eating bats. But this country actually surpasses the US in economic growth. So how is that possible? Now let me go back to my original train of thought when I said that disregarding our environment led to this event. Now, many Western countries, like the US, have shifted towards being a consumer country, while China and a lot of Southeast Asian countries have geared towards being supplier countries. Now, why is that important? Because this system helps the consumer countries to have their sense of comfort. False comfort. But in the process, supplier countries are being taken advantage of, not only by consumer countries, but by their own system as well. In order to attract labor, they offer cheap workforce, no regulations, no environmental restrictions, and no workforce protection. Now, while certain layers in these countries become so rich out of this that they end up purchasing shares of the consumer countries, other layers of the same country is kept in poverty, working in unhealthy conditions. So who is the US to criticize China when they've been supporting everything that led up to this point to have their own comfort? Because either it wouldn't be produced or you couldn't afford it. So on a larger scale, you're just as much part of the problem. You can be totally green and environmentally conscious, but as long as you're enjoying the fruits of this bad trade system, you are part of the problem. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not much different in partaking in this whole system because there's not even much chance to do differently. Just don't be a hypocrite and see the big picture and blame the right people, which might have to include ourselves as well. So instead of blaming, come up with a plan how to change this. Would you sacrifice your children's future on your current comfort? Especially consider this when you see how much toxic waste have accumulated on this planet. Those hills of plastics have not been dumped by just one person. They've been building up bottle by bottle or cap by cap. Now, I don't want you guys to think I'm blaming any countries specifically, and I'm not blaming anyone specifically, but countries do blame each other, and we do tend to blame other countries. So how about countries would finally grow up and stop blaming each other, start taking responsibility for their own deeds, and lead by example? But we don't even have to go abroad to see how broken this system is. During this lockdown, only essential jobs could remain. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, grocery store workers, post office clerks, delivery people. So what is common in these jobs other than they're deemed to be essential now? That the workers who work there, maybe other than the medical fields, are not regarded highly. They're usually considered not educated, replaceable, and that is reflected through their wages as well. But what if they were not there? What if there was no one to stock the shelves in the grocery stores? What if there was no one to deliver your mail? What if there was no one to deliver your food because you're too afraid to go out and get it for yourself? So shouldn't these people be regarded higher? Not just now during the pandemic, but in general. But let me tell you about another layer of the society that's even more invisible and probably even less respected. Farm workers. Especially in this country, in the US, a lot of times farm workers are undocumented immigrants. Now these people work even now without any benefits. They're the ones putting fruits and vegetables and meat on your table. Because again, cheap labor helps to put food on your table that you can afford. So think for a second, who's the one to blame? And who brings more value to the table? The one whose work was deemed to be non-essential and is sitting at home watching Netflix and posting about how terrible that the gym is closed and they're bored to death? Or those people who are still out there now working, producing everything that currently contributes to your comfort? Shouldn't these people have at least the same security that everyone else has? Shouldn't these people be regarded financially as well according to their true value? So while for the impact phase the key word was panic, for the impression phase the key word is essential, because everything is reduced now to essential. We're doing the essential physical activities, physical checks on ourselves to keep ourselves healthy. We're meeting the essential people and keeping in touch with the essential circle of people, and the essential people can still work. The essential businesses can still be open. So I want to leave you with this question now. What is essential for you? Is it your current comfort or your future? So you can leave your comments and questions in the comment section below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't done so. So in my next video I'm going to talk about the last phase, which will have more practical and easy to follow ideas on how we can recover from this event. So I hope to see you next time, and until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and use this time to your advantage.